Hi everyone, a quick reminder that our RSS feed changeover will be taking place this weekend. Once the handover is complete, we'll update the website with the new links for anyone who needs them. Most of you won't feel a thing. This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic, episode 329 for October 28th, 2018. Happy almost Halloween! We're bringing you our horror holiday offering a bit early this year, with the Cast of Wonders original, Widow Bones Makes Her Rounds, by Gretchen Tesmere. Gretchen Tesmere is a writer based in the US-Canadian borderlands of northern New York. She writes both poetry and short fiction, with work appearing in Nature, Daily Science Fiction, and Strange Horizons, among other venues. The story is narrated by the incomparable Kate Baker. Kate Baker is the podcast director and non-fiction editor for Clarkesworld magazine. She has been very privileged to narrate over 350 short stories or poems by some of the biggest names in science fiction and fantasy for multiple venues. Kate won the Hugo Award for Best Semi-Prozine in 2011 and 2013, the British Fantasy Award for Best Magazine in 2014, and the World Fantasy Award for Special Award Non-Professional in 2014, alongside the wonderfully talented editorial staff of Clarkesworld magazine. Kate is currently situated in northern Connecticut with her first fans, her wonderful children. She is currently working as the Director of Operations for the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. Follow her online or on Twitter, and check out her own fiction here at Cast of Wonders. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Widow Bones Makes Her Rounds by Gretchen Tesmere. Narrated by Kate Baker. Brom Bones, too, who shortly after his rival's disappearance conducted the blooming Katrina to the altar, was observed to look exceedingly knowing whenever the story of Ichabod was related, and always burst into a hearty laugh at the mention of the pumpkin, which led some to suspect that he knew more about the matter than he chose to tell. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. With everything that happened, I don't know that I would describe myself as blooming. Willing, I suppose, and certainly compliant. But a flower doesn't need to bloom to be plucked. After all, pretty is as pretty does, my father used to say. He didn't say much else, and I'm not sure if he meant it as a compliment or an insult. I've never really understood the phrase anyway. Are we predisposed to act in certain ways? If so, it would be a relief. My actions turned midnight moon macabre some time ago, and I hate to think it's all my own failing of character. The phrase rushes into my head this evening as I stand at the gate of the church graveyard, dressed in my usual widow's weeds. Black skirt, hooded cloak and leather gloves, with silver forks clutched in either hand like talons. The weather is autumn-chilled and gloomy. In Sleepy Hollow, the trees change color in late September, but it's October now and they're bleeding out onto the ground, as if a restless soldier took a sword through the woods, slashing veins on his way through. I stand on a thick, wet carpet of cherry, carrot, and straw leaves. Sleet drips from the slate skies above, trying to drain the landscape of color. But the sunset spills out from its precarious perch on the horizon, giving the whole hollow an eerie, rose-colored glow that entertains its shadows sideways. Sleepy Hollow is an eerie place, and autumn is an eerie season, filled with hauntings of both mind and soul. Reverend Van Dyne leaves the church late. He's long-winded in his prayers, but I know he has doubts like the rest of us. He puts confidence on every Sunday like a boiled wool coat, warm and familiar, his voice conjuring up all those same sermons we've heard over and over again since before Cotton Mather's time. Fire and brimstone and damnation. The coat wears thinner on nights like this, when the invisible world encroaches so seamlessly, it becomes hard to reconcile what we believe with what we see. The witching hour approaches. Reverend Van Dyne quickly descends the icy steps of the chapel with his collar thrown up against the chill of a frostbite breeze. He catches sight of me, hovering like a dour raven at the gate, giving me a short glance and a stiff nod. He knows my business here is direful, but someone has to do it. And not everyone is so comfortable in the company of ghosts. "Good evening, Widow Van Brunt," he greets grimly, using my dead husband's surname, rather than the customary Widow Bones that I hear from most of the Hollow. I have no preference between the two, but one is more accurate than the other. The Reverend doesn't wait for my reply. He knows from experience that the chapel yard offers no impenetrable sanctuary. We must face our past sins, or be prepared to run from them. His feet scuttle fast across the wooden bridge that spans the murky, muddy swamp at the bottom of two hills, flanking the church like twin sentries. He pauses on the other side, alert and listening for any movement in the cluttered speck of forest growing out of the swamp, as the old willows and elms groan in intermittent sprays of icy rain and frosty breeze. He shivers, admirably swallowing back any childish fears, and continues up the white stone road that leads to the snug safety of his sister's red brick house. The road is slick as snot, with a slow, steady sludge of rain dripping down and matting the sugar maple leaves like bloodstains. I watch him go, my eyes peering out from under the hood of my cloak. I wonder if he truly believes half of what he says on Sundays. Leaving God out of it, you would think that chivalry might compel him to take my place this evening. But fear is a dowdy little thing, isn't it? Especially when the dead rise and speak once more. I loiter in the violet-orange twilight. Another quarter hour passes before I hear the howls. The ghosts always rise from the church graveyard at sunset's end. The spirits buried here are older, unsettled, and anxious to start their night's haunting. The first is the wailing spirit of a Wequeesgeek woman in an unmarked grave, over there, by the bare-limbed tulip tree that's been struck by lightning too many times to call it coincidence. She screams out her grief, wringing her copper hands and pulling at strands of her long, black hair. Her anguished cries tear at the pit of my stomach. Her pain is centuries old, deeply rooted in an evil that chased her children away from this place and forced them to leave her bones. I would comfort her if I could, but I know my efforts would be paltry relief. Still, I give her what I can, a commiserating glance, our eyes briefly meeting over the tilted, weather-heaved grainstones, before I hasten on my way. In the afterburn glow of those last strands of sunlight, I step between mossy stones until I find a tomb etched with Latin phrases and Dutch names, all ending in Van Tassel. On my way past, I sink my thumb into the first letter of my father's name, scraping out the jaundiced lichen. I use the blunt edge of one of the silver forks to dig out old mud dauber nests in the V of our family name. I don't linger there. My father, unlike the other men in my life, has been good enough to die and stay dead. My destination lies behind the tomb, at a pauper's plot, given to a stranger by my father in recompense for crimes committed against him. And oh, the crimes were many. Ichabod Crane has risen already, sitting tensely on the stone that bears his name. He's as tall and lanky in death as he was in life, but he's paler, with the skin the color of drying deer bones. The threadbare clothes he was buried in are as ill-fitting as on the day he appeared in Sleepy Hollow, too eager to win me over, too foolish to understand the consequences of wanting a girl who would never want him back. "Katrina," he wheezes, wind whistling through the never-healed slit in his severed throat. "Hello, Ichabod." I answer with just his name. He wants more. He wants an apology, or an answer, or maybe a higher purpose. Don't we all? But I have nothing for him, and his affection for me has cooled considerably since his untimely end. Any words I offer will be met with the same ragged throat reply. "I won't listen to the lies of a filthy murderess." He's risen from his grave this night, as all the ghosts do, to finish what he couldn't finish in life. And that would be an ugly business. Vengeance is always ugly. As I stand in silence, his rage grows like tangled briars in the underbrush. "I won't stop with just you," he promises, spitting out words between crooked, half-rotten teeth. "When I'm through tonight, this cursed hollow will be cleansed of all its iniquities." I still say nothing. I've said many things before. In my past attempts, I've tried to coax, flatter, soothe his anger. None of it worked. And the ending is always the same, his reckless charge intent on my demise. If you weren't so damn predictable, my dear, perhaps I would have liked you more. With a primal shriek that echoes across the countryside, he pushes himself off his gravestone, lumbering in my direction. I clutch my silver fork steady and keep my eyes on Ichabod Crane's living corpse as he sprints the short distance between us. He will go for my throat like a god-forsaken vampire. With his long, stringy hair and famished, sunken eyes, he fits the part. Or so I imagine. I've never encountered a vampire, though one of the girls in town was visiting a cousin in Manchester the year they dug up Captain Harris's wife and burned her remaining organs to ash in a blacksmith's forge. They said the dead woman was draining the captain's new bride dry. I don't know if they forced a stake through Rachel Harris's heart, but they should have, just to be safe. I can't say it works on vampires, but it clearly works on Ichabod Crane. His tattered coat boasts more than one jagged hole at his breast, cut into the fabric by my silver forks to add to the mess of mangle scars marring the skin beneath his lapel. He lunges so fast, snarling at me like a wild animal. But I am not afraid. We've done this before so many times, Ichabod. And whatever my character failings, I haven't died yet. Ichabod reaches me in a fever, yanking back the hood of my cloak and grasping at my braids with dirty fingernails. His clammy hands are greedy and curve around my neck in a hideous embrace, his breath cold and stinking of bloated fish and mealworms. We wrestle, falling to the ground, his hands scratching and teeth gnashing. I cry out as his fingernails dig into the soft skin at my cheek, but I'm stronger, much to his dismay. I've always been stronger. He tries to pin me down, but I push him off, both of us rolling in the wet scattering of scarlet leaves. His hands are vicious, fingers attempting to dig at my eyes. I shut them tightly. But after years of practice, I know where to aim without looking. I drive one of my mother's silver forks into his heart and twist. He screams bloody murder, falling away from me, writhing, wretched, and dying again. I get to my knees, catching my breath while pushing the wayward strands of my ruined braids back behind my ears. I wipe thin scratches of blood from my cheek. I reach over and pull the fork from his chest, whispering, "I didn't kill you, Ichabod. Not that first time. And foolish and insufferable as you were, you didn't deserve to die like that. So for your sake, I took vengeance on the one that did the deed. But that's enough. Stop rising up in all your unholy terror, or I'll kill you again." He curses me with his last breath before returning to the grave for another year. But I'm cursed twice yearly, and I take little offense. It's wounded pride, and men seem to need to get these things off their chest, whether they're living or dead. I would stay to watch him melt back into the earth, but I still have to travel to the new cemetery on the other side of the hollow. My dearly departed husband, Abraham Van Brunt, known as Brom Bones from the day of his birth to the day of his premature and certainly suspicious death, will rise before midnight. He will be less intent on vengeance and more intent on whines and moans of, "Why did you do this to me, cat?" I always answer the same. "Because you deserved it." Then he'll curse me too, and we'll have a fight about it. I'll tell him I never loved him, that I never loved any living man, which will kill his spirit faster than a silver fork plunged deep in his jealous heart. As usual, I cross the bridge over the swamp at the same moment as the Hessian soldier. We're headed in different directions, but we have similar business to attend to. It's all the same silver shades of midnight moon macabre. Ever gallant, he dismounts from his monstrous horse and bows to me. I curtsy in the pleasing manner of Dutch girls who are raised for parties, marriage, and mending by the fire. I pull off my leather gloves before extending my bare hand. The Hessian takes it, but he's been headless for so long that any kiss I feel pressed into the palm must be imagined. Still, it is a pleasant fiction. Here is the rival poor Brom and Ichabod we're truly up against. As I may have mentioned, I never loved any living man. I'm afraid I prefer the strong, eternally silent type. But men who are too busy chattering on about how they profess not to know how women's hearts are wooed and won can hardly be expected to hush their mutterings and listen to the inner workings of my haunted heart. We tarry on the bridge. The clouds scuttle away, revealing a full harvest moon and a beautiful night beneath. The moon's glow reflects off the swamp's surface. Smoke from village chimneys wafts in the air, mixing with fainter scents of pumpkins and ripe apples. A barn owl hoots from the woodland. The Hessian adjusts the saddle cinches on his mount, preparing for a long ride. I stand close, stroking the horse's velvet nose. The routine is familiar, and I savor it. The single perfect moment of my year. At this hour, on this bridge, with him. As my headless horseman prepares for his night's journey, I start to smile.
Gretchen gave us some great show notes for you, which I'll read in a minute. But I want to touch on another point first. The passing reference in the story to Captain Harris's wife. Rachel Harris died of what we now know as tuberculosis in Manchester, Vermont in 1790, just 1 year after marrying Captain Isaac Burton. A year later, Burton remarried Huldah Powell, who also swiftly contracted the disease. What followed became known as the New England vampire panic, as the bacterium that caused the disease spread between communities living in close quarters in the Hudson Valley lowlands. Bereaved family members, fueled by penny dreadfuls and Eastern European migration, believed that the deceased women were draining the vital life essence of their living relatives. Only by exhuming the body and inspecting for unusually fresh organs, especially the heart, and burning them could end the predation. There's no reference in the historical accounts to any of the victims or perpetrators drinking blood, the characteristic most often associated with the vampire label, especially these days. The term most likely came from sensationalist newspapers of the time and has stuck. Apparently, it was also a part of the ritual for the living victim to drink the ashes of the immolated dead, a spectacle that, in Huldah Powell's case, apparently attracted over 1,000 onlookers in what one presumes was an otherwise boring February. Unsurprisingly, the cure had no effect, and Huldah passed in September 1793. The parallels to the witch trials of centuries prior are obvious, as is the fact that most victims of vampire panic were young women. What better than a gruesome cautionary tale laced with a condemned afterlife to enforce religious gender norms? And it's unknown, even today, why a population well known for stoicism and piety seemed swept away by such sensationalist beliefs. Perhaps the cultural isolation of these rural communities, combined with a religious acceptance of superstition, proved a fertile ground for rampant imagination on the long winter nights. Here's Gretchen's show notes. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is my favorite Halloween story. The sense of supernatural menace, the haunted setting, the themes of outsiders and order versus wilderness. It's all great and honestly doesn't need any improvement, except for Katrina. I don't buy the girl's vapid indifference, and fleshing out flat and minor characters is a hobby of mine. So this story is about giving Katrina a voice and exploring Sleepy Hollow from her point of view. Finally, a personal side note which may or may not be the main reason I'm firmly #Team Katrina, my great-grandmother was a Van Tassel. Join us next week as we celebrate the start of Dino-Vember with The Raptor Snatchers by Rachel K. Jones. We rely on you to pay our authors, cover our server costs, and generally keep things afloat around here. There are 3 ways you can help us do all of that, all of which start with the letter P. PayPal. Our website has a shiny button just waiting for your click. Choose either to donate at any amount you want, or subscribe for as little as $5 a month for access to our digital convention table of premium content goodies. Patreon. Looking for a little more engaging of an experience? Patreon features all the premium content, plus a personalized audio feed of interviews, regular news updates, and higher pledge levels if you're feeling super generous. Finally, there's Press. If financial support doesn't work for you, you can always help us by raising our profile. Got a podcast yourself and looking for guests? We'd love to chat. Want to interview us for a blog? Get in touch or leave us reviews wherever you get your podcasts. And consider our stories for roundups, listicles, award nominations, and reviews of their own. Even a retweet or a like can have a big impact. Money is no requirement to sharing the love of audio fiction. Every bit helps, and thank you. Join us throughout October and into November as our Flash Fiction contest runs on the EA Forum, forum.escapeartists.net. Come vote for your favorites, and visit us on Twitter @CastOfWonders. Come and say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of assistant editors Catherine Inskip and Alexis Goebel. Our associate editors are Tonya Bezpalko, Amy Brennan, Alicia Caporaso, Trace Von Teal, William Heitminer, Andrew K. Ho, Sean Proctor, Ray O, Susie Rodriguez, Carissa Sluss, Emma Smales, and Chris Tang. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter, our community manager is Danny Daly, and I remain as always your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like for free, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov and available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thanks for listening.